The U.S. has become the epicenter of the COVID-19 outbreak, and it's all happening right here in New York.
You're there in the hospital, but you got God. You don't really appreciate the breath of life until you can't breathe.
Both of you contracted COVID-19. Can you tell me what happened?
We're not sure exactly how we contracted it. In New York, there were so many cases and everything at the time. We were just feeling really, really sick. And so we went to the hospital and got tested. So they said, look, it's going to take 5 to 7 days to get your result. But based on what you've said, you've got it. So go home and quarantine yourselves, even from each other, for the next 14 days.
I started getting the chills, my body started aching. I couldn't eat much, but my headaches were probably the most excruciating thing of this virus, actually, for me, was the headaches. Because I've never experienced anything like it. I was blessed to have Mum from New Zealand here, so she was able to look after our 2-year-old. I was trying to deal with the pain, and then we got the result back saying it was confirmed, told us we had COVID-19. So Evan was in the basement, I was in the bedroom, and pretty much had to lock ourselves away from the rest of the house.
We both ended up in hospital. My symptoms were getting better and I was starting to feel better. And then every now and then I was just struggling to breathe. And then at like 1 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I just couldn't get any air into my lungs. So I ran upstairs just to tell my wife, hey, something's not right. And I actually collapsed. And so they rang the ambulance and the ambulance took me to the hospital. Basically, they let me out the next day. But what they said was that a number of people that had COVID-19, their lungs were just spasming, and that was basically what it was. So I couldn't just couldn't get any oxygen. But when they gave me oxygen and everything, I felt much better. But it was pretty scary at the time, and that was like Monday, and then by Friday, Moira's symptoms hadn't gotten better, and her breathing was getting worse and worse and worse. And so we ended up having to take her to the emergency room as well.
That sounds really scary.
Yeah, it was actually, because I have asthma too. I thought I could deal with it at home, I could just fight this virus off, the pain and all that. I tried everything, drinking lots, I'm even Googling, how do I, what's the best way to just get rid of, because I was coughing a lot too, and, there's a lot of phlegm. So I decided, maybe it's just, asthma, so I could just deal with it. But it ended up being pneumonia, which I didn't realize. And we have some friends who are doctors in our church, and they often just check on us, especially that week after speaking with Evan and myself. She said, you got to go to the ER. He drove me straight there. He couldn't get out. He just dropped me there. Anyone with COVID, you can't bring any family members in. They drop you, and you don't know what will happen from that point on. So I walked in, I couldn't breathe, and I spoke to the staff there, and then I just sat down in line, and it was just so packed. The ER was packed with so many people from all different ages, and you're separated as well. You weren't sitting next to each other with masks on. Everyone's, in their full PPE gear, and there was just such a sense of sadness in there, and anxiety and fear. Like I was rocking back and forth in my chair. I couldn't breathe. I was trying to get air after they had tested my oxygen levels, and so they ended up giving me some oxygen. It helped a little bit, but I was just still struggling, and then they called me in for the tests. I waited about 2 hours. It's first come, first served there. Took me in, did all the blood tests, EKG. They found out I had pneumonia. It was COVID, caused by the COVID. And that's why I couldn't breathe at home. So it was quite severe. But if I left it a day or so later, I can tell you now, it would have been a very different story for me, because I was trying to fight it myself. I was in the hospital about 7 days. And at the time, the first 4 days, especially the first day or two, I really struggled. There were times I'll just text Evan, I'll go, I can't breathe. I'm on the oxygen, they're looking after me as best they can, because, we have a whole ward of COVID patients. The hospital's covered in COVID patients anyway, and they're doing the best they can. And there's just times I couldn't breathe, and I'll just cry out to God. I couldn't, you can't do anything else other than cry out to God. That's, it's the only name. It was, even when I was at home, when we were sick, our children, 3 of our kids were getting sick. And so even that, we couldn't even focus even on ourselves, because we worry about the kids as well, because we were already going through the pain, and we know, but as a parent, you worry about them as well. And especially you forget about your own symptoms. And it was just one of those things that just hit us from out of nowhere. So, but there was many times I cry out to God because it's just you in your hospital bed, and there's a curtain that separates me from another patient. So you're quietly behind your curtain, you're praying, and that's all you can do. You just pray. You're there in the hospital, but you got God. You just really cry out to Him. That's you don't really appreciate the breath of life until you can't breathe. I think about it now, and I think I look at my life differently.
Wow. You talk about praying in the hospital. Can you tell me how getting this virus has changed your prayer life?
I'll be honest, like I said, I've never felt like this before, like physically. Pain hasn't hit me the way it did with COVID. Mentally, it's draining, physically draining, and even spiritually draining. Like you're just crying because you can't do anything else other than cry out. And it doesn't have to be long prayers. It's like, God, please, Jesus, heal me, And I'm doing that in the spirit. In the hospital, I was just praying in the spirit. In the ER, I was doing the same. I was rocking back and forth. I was just crying out to God just to help, all of us that were there, because I knew that we were COVID cases, and some will go in there and not be able to walk back out again. Everybody is different, but for my particular case, that was what happened to me. And I love my kids, I love my husband, it's who you think about, and those times your loved ones. My mum's here, and my little sister passed in 2018 from cancer in May. I don't want my mum to be able to have to go through that whole, because I know she's already been through enough, and I know for her, she goes, I can't lose another child. She's praying, God, why is this happening? But she's trusting in Him, standing on His word. So prayer is the thing I love to do most. I really had to rely on God. But I'm so grateful because I had in my heart, I knew there were so many people all around the world, as well here in New York City, our friends, our families, they were praying. I was encouraged to receive those messages whilst in hospital.
Over 14,000 people have died in New York, and over 240,000 cases of COVID-19 have been confirmed. What is it like living in New York City right now?
I reckon that 214,000 or whatever number is soft, because a number of people, they didn't test them. So like for us, when we got it, we got tested. And then when we rang up about our kids, they said, just assume they got it. Don't worry about testing it. So that number's low for the amount of people. And there's also a number of people that have passed away that were never diagnosed that aren't considered in that number. We've seen more people die that are like connected to us, or like 1 or 2 degrees of separation, than I've ever experienced in my life. I'm doing a funeral for a family in a couple of days, and they basically dropped off their dad at hospital. They weren't able to visit him in the hospital. They weren't able to, they haven't been able to see him since. Basically, there's no embalming. They're like pretty much straight to the graveyard, and then they bury him straight away.
Yeah.
And so you can only have a couple of people there. It's like really tough for people.
Yeah.
A couple of my friends that are pastors of churches have died. I had a guy ring me the other day, and he said, this is the second member of my family that's died in a week. It's like the whole city has got PTSD, like there's so many people that are really on edge and really stressed.
Pain. Yeah. So much pain, so much anxiety, so much depression is coming on a level never seen before. Right now, we're just praying. Our church is praying every day between 12 and 1. They just committed. That's all we can do, and find creative ways we can help people in mourning, help those who are in our sphere of influence, those who we connected with, people in our church who have family members or friends. We're looking for ways. You can't go out and do lots of things, but we can drop groceries. As when we were sick, our church family had come in and they just dropped off boxes of groceries for us. In the last month, as you know, we've been hit with COVID-19, myself, my husband, and 3 of our children. And so we want to say thank you. I stand here today because of the power of prayer of loved ones all around the globe, and so we are so appreciative of your prayer. We so also appreciate the many gifts and also the groceries that have been dropped off to our home. When you're so sick and you're bedbound, you're unable to go outside.
What is it like to lead a church through a pandemic?
6 weeks ago, we were event coordinators, and now we're a media company. So we had to learn pretty quickly how to stay in touch with people as much as we can online. But it's interesting that we've probably been able to reach way more people online and through, you know, other means than we probably would in any way. Like on Easter Sunday, we had hundreds of people watch our services, and you know, we would never fit that many people in our building. You know, one of our friends down the road, he has like 900 in their church. They were getting 4,000 watching their services online. And so, you know, for us as well, I feel like we've been able to connect with people in a way that we weren't prepared for. But I think that a lot of people are open to hearing the message. You know, Bible sales have gone through the roof here at the moment, and a lot of people are responding to the gospel. I even had a thing with one of our services. One of the guys from one of the leaders of our church works at a medical clinic, and he sent me a photo of all their staff sitting there watching our service. You know, we had to sort of pivot pretty quickly, but since then we've seen a lot of opportunity to minister and be a blessing and communicate the gospel message, just, you know, using different means.
Both of you have suffered from the virus and live in the coronavirus epicentre of the world. Do you have any advice for us down under?
This is real. We're losing people. It's dangerous. You know, Australia, I understand that people are frustrated and they're in their house and they haven't had a lot of people die and they don't know anyone who has died. But trust me, what they have is better than what we have. You know, and so they need to take this stuff seriously. You know, the pain that they have for a short time is going to be way better than the pain that they could be experiencing right now. And so, especially for Christians, we should be way more supportive and encouraging, and you know, trying to do what we can to make a difference for people around us. You know, look out for the elderly in the community. You know, people that are already isolated are even more isolated.
I think, you know, when you look at the deaths, say just for example, over 14,000 deaths in New York City alone, every death is associated with a person. You know, it's a family, it's a mother, it's a father, it's a grandparent. When you look at it that way, it should do something within your heart. When I think about those deaths, I think about the many lives have been affected, you know, the young mothers who are passed and the young fathers, you know, so suddenly taken from their children, and their children, you know, are left. As Christians, we've got to be responsible, and we also got to just be able to pray and believe for God, you know, to do some miracles in the lives of people.